Hey guys, welcome to the first installment of Whiteboard Farm Science. Today I'm talking all about the benefits of red clover, also known as crimson clover. There are so many. This is by far the favorite pasture and cover crop plant that we have right now, and it has so many uses, so many benefits, and I'm going to be talking about those today. So the case for red clover, by the end of this video, I am willing to bet you will at least be considering red clover. It is a fabulous cover crop. It is fabulous for pasture and so many other uses. I'm going to start talking about those. So let's just start with the basics. A nitrogen fixer. Clover is a legume similar to alfalfa or peas, and all legumes have the superpower where, unlike most any other plant, they're able to pull nitrogen out of the air and put that into the soil. Okay, so why is that beneficial? Well, nitrogen is actually what's responsible for most of your plant's growth. So when you've got new young, let's say you've got a pasture that's not doing great, what a lot of people in a conventional setting will do is they will sprinkle nitrogen salts over their whole pasture. With legumes like red clover, you actually do not have to do that. This puts so much nitrogen back into the soil from the air that really benefits the rest of the community down there. So as a nitrogen fixer, it is absolutely incredible. Also, it is a huge biomass producer. So red clover, once established, can be pretty dang vigorous for a pasture or a cover crop operation. In ideal conditions, you can expect to get 7,000 pounds per acre biomass from red clover. That has amazing implications when you think about how much protein it really packs, again, being a legume, in a pasture or homestead operation. It's almost unbeatable in that regard. And while we're talking about pounds of biomass, let's talk about how many pounds of nitrogen it can actually put into the ground. So remember, we've got nitrogen just floating around in the atmosphere here, and this clover is taking it and sucking it back up into the leaves and transferring that down into the root system. So how many pounds can 1 acre actually sequester into the ground? In ideal conditions, you can expect 100 pounds per acre. Now, when you think of an acre and how many square feet that is, 100 pounds is not the most, but consider buying it in its salt form. So when you're buying it in its salt form, you're not getting pure nitrogen, okay? It's connected to a salt, which a lot of people in conventional wisdom, which again, that's why we do these videos, is to basically put a death to conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom says, oh yeah, all fertilizers come in salt form, just put it in the ground. But do you remember in your history class when you learned about, say, like the Punic Wars with Rome and Carthage, where the Romans beat the Carthaginians so badly that they salted the earth? I'm sure you've heard that. Like, to salt the earth basically means to make it ungrowable. And yeah, there's minerals and nutrients in salt, but conventional wisdom has kind of taught us that therefore it's a good thing to just spray salt on the top. Even if you have a problem believing the fact that salt is not great for the earth in that state, consider the fact that this nitrogen has to bind to that salt. So just the mass alone, you're losing some mass of nitrogen. So 100 pounds per acre is actually pretty great. Consider the fact that if you were going to go to, say, Home Depot and buy 5 20-pound bags of that salt nitrogen, you're spending over $100 on that. So I went to Home Depot's website and I looked at what a nitrogen-rich fertilizer costs there. So a 20-pound bag will cost $30, and that 20 pounds covers 4,000 square feet. Now if you look at an acre is over 40,000 square feet. So if a 20-pound bag of fertilizer covers 4,000 square feet for $30,
do the math on that and realize that you need about 11 bags of fertilizer to cover 1 acre. So each of these 11 bags costs $30, so you're paying $330 to fertilize a single acre with nitrogen bought from the store. So first off, that's expensive. If you were to buy clover outright and plant it, you're going to spend way less than $330. But also, that clover is compounding. It's every year injecting nitrogen and building your soil. Where the store-bought, salt nitrogen, salt fertilizer, is actually degrading the soil year after year, and you have to keep buying it. So in 3 years, you're looking at $1,000, right? Whereas if you just, dropped, if you went organic and spent less than $100 on clover to seed a whole acre, you'd be good. So, moral of the story is, you don't need this stuff. Plant clover. Okay, back to the whiteboard.
So just the cost of seeds to seed this clover into the ground pays for itself within a year. So just consider that. I mean, the nitrogen benefits are great, and it's doing it every single year. So absolutely beneficial there. It also creates this awesome micro canopy. And what I mean by that is, so let's say let's pretend that this is like a mammoth red clover. So it's growing, 6 to 8 inches off the ground once it's established. And underneath that, you've got grass, pardon the lame illustration here, but you've got grass that basically grows underneath that, and it creates this very healthy community. So when the grass pierces that, things are still great, but it's really beneficial on a pasture operation, and I'm really excited to talk to you about that in a minute. But let's get to this. So the root system, it has both an awesome lateral and deep root system. So that is super beneficial on a pasture setting. I'm going to talk about why in a little bit, but just the basics of that. The lateral root just holds the earth together really well, especially if you're establishing a new pasture, trying to bring that pasture to life. Great for aerating and adding nutrients to that shallow level. And then bam, look at that tap root. The tap root can actually go as deep as 2 feet into the ground. So if that's a weed, that really stinks. But thank goodness this is not a weed, because once it's established, it's there, baby. Which brings me to my next point, longer establishment. All good things take time, right? Red clover will take more time than, say, a buckwheat or a sorghum Sudan grass mix. So what a lot of people do is if they're planting it in a brand new pasture, or if they're doing it as a cover crop, what they will do is they will kind of seed it together with some of these faster starters. Again, buckwheat and sorghum Sudan grass is a great alternative to that. Sorry, I said it's a great alternative to that. It's a great companion. It's a great companion to red clover. Okay, let's talk about what kind of weather you want to plant it in. It likes cooler weather. So I live in Utah, and I regularly have weeks where it gets over 100. So when I read this, it kind of put me off a little bit. Cause I was like, well, what the heck? Like mine does fine, and it will do fine if you have that kind of setup. It just really matters on when you seed it. So in a situation like mine, I seeded very heavily in the springtime and let it get established before the summer. As long as it had enough rain, or not rain. We're in Utah, second dry state in the nation. We don't get much rain. As long as we had enough irrigation, it was fine. If you live in the north U.S. or Canada, seed it in the springtime. If you live in the south, a fall seeding is going to be perfect for you. It also loves shady areas. So if you have a part of your pasture, maybe it's under your shade tree or something like that, and you're having a hard time establishing something, this is great once you can establish it. Okay, cover crop or pasture solution. So we do a little bit of both, and they kind of merge on our homestead. But from a cover crop perspective, it's tremendous for weed suppression. It's got great biomass production. Again, we've already talked about it. Superhero power, which is sequestering that nitrogen out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. So it's fabulous on both accounts, and I'm going to talk about how we use that on our homestead. Okay, so the question is, how do we use it on our homestead? And the answer is for basically any possible use that you can think of. If you've watched the channel, you know we've got sheep, chickens, rabbits. I'm excited we're doing bees and an orchard next year. This clover plays into all of this. So let's just start with chickens and rabbits. So our chickens are fiends for this red clover. Like if I have like a bag of you know, rolled oats and a handful of red clover just freshly picked off the pasture and thrown to my chickens, they go for the clover before the oats. I'm not even kidding around here. They will chomp this stuff up. Again, it's awesome. It's got so much nutrient in it, packs more protein than just your typical grass. Apparently it tastes good. I don't eat it, but the chickens do. The rabbits also love it. Why that's great for rabbits is because we try to give our rabbits free choice dried alfalfa hay pretty much year round. And the nice thing about the red clover is that when the red clover is established, it is just like a weed. Like I've gone down and I've spent 20 minutes just picking up just handfuls and handfuls in just like a 20-foot radius. And I still have stuff left over. It seems like 2 days later, bam, it's back. So it's super beneficial as a fodder for your chickens, for your rabbits. It doesn't grow that tall. You know, it's not going to grow up to be 4 feet tall. You're going to have to bend down and pick it up. It's less than a foot tall, but super beneficial for both the chickens and rabbits. Now sheep. This is the reason I originally planted it, is because, you know, I wanted a nitrogen fixer for the pasture. I wanted something that the sheep would eat that gave them a lot of nitrogen. However, the sheep did not go for the clover, which I found interesting. Kind of a blessing in disguise because it takes longer to establish, right? But I bought it for the sheep and put it in the pasture for the sheep. What is great for it, again, this whole permaculture setup, is that they will go for other things during the spring and summertime, but during the fall, they went for the clover. And that's great because the rest of the pasture is kind of going into, is kind of like sunsetting into, you know, a dormant season. The clover is still vigorous, so the sheep start going for it. So super awesome as a fall plant or a fall forage for sheep. Now, let me talk to you about the superpower of clover in a sheep setup. If you know how sheep eat, you know two things. One, they eat that grass right down to the dang nub. And two, they will rip and tear out root systems. That's just how they do it. Clover fixes both of those problems, and here's why. So remember this canopy that I talked about here, this micro canopy? When you've got this clover, this is just one plant, but if you've got, you know, hundreds in just a few square feet, you've got this canopy that really has this great 2 to 3 inch protection for this grass. So you get grass into the hyper growth stage and basically keep it there. And then when the sheep get desperate, they'll start poking their nose down underneath that canopy and munching on that grass. Why is that beneficial? Well, as a sheep keeper, I can tell you how frustrating it is to see this awesome pasture with 1/4 of it looking like garbage, and my sheep complaining about they want me to put out hay for them. It's so frustrating because sheep will just go down and eat that young grass all day long. Now, the answer to that is you tell the sheep tough, and eventually after a few days they'll figure it out. What's nice about this is that it's like this secret underground grass that basically has this canopy, so once the sheep punctures through that canopy, they notice that grass. And so as they're eating that grass, they're chomping on that clover too. So it's really, really great to kind of basically preserve your field so you don't just constantly have, you know, dead and thriving parts of the pasture. Now the second issue is sheep grabbing the grass and tearing it out by the roots. What do we know about clover roots? They have this amazing shallow root system. And this shallow root system is like utterly brilliant for a pasture setup with sheep, because as the sheep come up and they rip that grass out, it's so entangled in this deep webbing of clover. They form like a companionship relationship where the grass is actually protected. Its root system is protected because it's so entangled with the shallow but thick root system of the clover. and then bam, we've got this taproot here. Again, it goes down as deep as 2 feet, that is collecting nutrients like phosphorus and other micronutrients that are deeper in the soil, and basically passing that up to the plant and giving that also to the shallower part of the root system. So again, just, I don't even know if it's like a symbiotic relationship, because the grass isn't really giving much to the clover. What do you call a one-way symbiotic relationship? I don't know. But the clover is awesome for your grass. So that's a long conversation about sheep. Let's start talking about bees. We are doing bees next year. Bees is something that I've wanted to do since I was like a teenager. I'm so excited to be doing bees. Our flow hive just came in the mail last week. Super stoked about that. But bees love clover. If you find any honey at a grocery store, typically it's clover honey. It's because clover is prolific and bees love it. The one problem is this little relationship right here. Who else likes flowers? The sheep also like the flowers. My field, it's funny, my wife and I were on Google Earth, or Google Maps, recently, and we saw a picture of our property before we moved here, like 4 years ago. And the people that lived here before us, they didn't really consistently have animals on their pasture. About 2/3 of the grass was yellow with dandelions. Now that's dandelions, not clover, but sheep love eating the dandelion flowers. They love eating the clover flowers. So that we do have some runoff space. We have a rotational system, so the clover has time to bounce back. But where we do have flowers, the bees dig it. Okay. Now, orchard cover crop. Let's talk about that for a second. So we have, we're trying to set up a system where we basically have 4 paddocks and then a runoff orchard. So you could call it like 5 paddocks. For our sheep on just our small 1.25 acre homestead. And why the orchard runoff is beneficial? One, we just have one extra place for the sheep, and like we said, clover is a great place for grass and the sheep relationship. But the orchard cover crop, using this red clover as an orchard cover crop, is great because it's injecting nitrogen into that soil. And it's got that taproot that allows some of the benefits to go quite deep. And so when we've got new young trees, this new orchard that we want to start planting next year, and we'll probably finish the year after that, it's going to be really, really beneficial to just have this awesome canopy. And again, remember right here, cooler weather, and I should have also written down here, but shadier areas, like it's a great in an orchard setup. Which brings me to, I'm going to skip biomass because it just flows so nicely to talk about it as a weed killer. So remember how I talked about it like shady areas. So if you've ever had like a squash patch or a pumpkin patch or some kind of gourd patch, you've probably noticed that it's both efficient and inefficient in space usage. They spread and they go this way and that way, and you got watermelons climbing up here and leaving this bare earth. It's great because you're going to get a lot of fruit and veggies out of it, but it also kind of stinks because that's when the weeds come in, right? And where this is really great is because if you have a squash patch, you can just throw that clover down. Let's say throw it down in spring, and you're going to throw your squash in the late summer. Throw this clover down in the springtime, let it get established, and when you're ready to plant, a dozen or whatever items, do it the exact same way. Just make a hill like you do with any kind of gourd. Make a small hill, plant it in there, and it will go onto the clover. Clover's fine. It likes that canopy, and it's going to suppress the weeds, and its canopy is going to form a barrier that says any weeds that get blown in there are going to have a much less chance of getting going to success, I guess is what you'd call it. So as a weed killer in a squash patch, in basically any kind of setting, if you have a no-till garden, use that for your walkways. We've thought about doing that for our walkways. Clover's fine. It will look sad when you step on clover because just like snow, you'll see your footprint there, and then you'll look back a half hour later and like your footprint's gone. It just bounces back. Super resilient plant. And then biomass. Biomass is incredibly beneficial for someone like me because I'm on a very small set of land compared to other homesteaders, compared to other market gardeners, meat producers, etc. We're just 1.25 acres, and so if I'm getting more biomass out of this red clover, it's so beneficial because That's more food for the animals. That's more nitrogen going into the ground. If you're in a setup that's larger than mine, this can be really great to mow. And yes, I said that right. Like, bring your clover up and mow it down, and let it go up and mow it down. What that does is it drops all those nutrients back onto the soil. If you're in a no-till situation, that's a great area, especially like if you have walkways, or if you want mulch, or if you want straw or hay, you can mow it and dry it up. Like, that's something that I haven't done yet, just because I don't have enough to do that. But from a biomass standpoint, it does help me because it's food for the animals, right? Okay, if you haven't figured this out already, I am just such a huge fan of red clover. I cannot find enough of it. Let me say the only downside of it. It's more expensive than most other cover crops that I find, but I feel like it's worth it. Okay, so I really encourage you to find a use for red clover on your homestead, even if you're not a homesteader and you're just a backyard gardener. Cover crops are exceptional for so many reasons, and red clover is among the top of my list for a cover crop or a pasture supplement. I appreciate you stopping by today. If you haven't already, direct your eyes to this arrow and hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. It goes a long way for me. I'm not monetized yet. When I do get monetized, maybe I'll buy some lights and a better mic so these videos improve. So if you want to see more of these videos and you want to see them get better, hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way for me, and I get to see you on the next video. So thanks for stopping by. I'll see you on that next video.